This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and I've got Andy Blaker back with me this week. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know what? Andrew and I have uncovered a very X-Files-y Mandela effect mystery here with these Dreamland episodes.
This is like breaking news, people. I mean, we've stumbled on something here that I have never seen addressed anywhere, and I'm just not sure of anything anymore.
You heard it here at the X-Cast first, everybody. I'm sure you're wondering what we're even talking about. Okay, last week I said that the episode Dreamland I was directed by Rob Bowman. I checked IMDb, and it says Rob Bowman. I checked X-Files Wiki. It says Rob Bowman. So IMDb, X-Files Wiki have Rob Bowman listed. Andrew, you checked.
Well, okay, and you also, we pulled this up. You pulled up the episode on Hulu.
Yes.
And who is credited as the director on Hulu for Dreamland Part 1?
Rob Bowman.
Okay, so I pulled up the Monsters of the Week, the complete critical companion to the X-Files, the collection that was edited from the old AV Club reviews. And the Kim Manners is the director for Part 1, according to that book. And I pulled out the DVD set, the complete series DVD set that was released back in the day. And in that episode, we actually pulled up the episode, played the episode, directed by Kim Manners. I'm not even joking.
So who directed Dreamland 1?
Yes.
We don't know.
So
we're going to have to
this
do
is
some
fascinating. And then, so you looked at the X-Files Wiki fandom group. If you go to actual Wikipedia, which again, I'm not saying, authoritative source here, but they have Kim Manners as the director for Part 1, which is funny because the wiki, they kind of pull from Wikipedia typically, don't they? You would see the same information both ways. So what I find the most troubling, though, and I don't have the Blu-ray set in front of me, but I wonder if I, put that in what it would say. But the fact that the actual credits were somehow amended, which, it's interesting because, we all know that when between the complete DVD set and the Blu-ray set, minor kerfuffle back in the day, they did change the font for the titles. So clearly someone did go in and edit those. But the fact that now you have two different men listed as Part 1's director, this is Mandela effect, isn't it?
It is.
Depending on what source.
In front of our eyes, this is happening.
Depending on how you source your X-Files content, you're going to get a different answer. So, this is just... We need
we're
some
putting
answers.
this out there. I'm going to have to investigate. I'm going to ask Frank Spotnitz. I'm going to tweet to him and be like, Mr. Spotnitz, please clear this mystery up. This is a major... This is important. This is the director of the episode.
You have the wrong man being credited somewhere in this.
And they're both great directors.
Yeah. We were talking the whole time last week, this is a Rob Bowman episode, and I didn't even think about it. And I remember knowing that there's a director for Part 1 and a different director for Part 2, and wondering kind of, why? Just wondering.
But Part 2 is unanimously Michael Watkins, correct?
Yes. Everywhere we can see, it's Michael Watkins directed Dreamland Part 2. Yes.
But just to be clear, you have 3 sources that say Kim Manners, and I have 3 sources that say Rob Bowman.
Yes. And again, the most troubling of it all is the actual episode. The DVD says something different than the streaming content, at least on Hulu.
This is amazing. I don't even know what to think. So anyways, all right. We need to get into our episode.
Do we? Can we? I can't.
Yeah.
I'm shaking at the core here.
conundrum aside, they're trying to like inveigle and obfuscate us clearly.
Well, they've succeeded. I mean,
right? But we are going to investigate this, and maybe by the time the episode comes out, I can have like a little addendum or something to let everybody know, because it's going to be a while before this airs. So yeah, okay. So in this episode, Dreamland Part 2, Scully begins to suspect that her partner's strange behavior is more than it appears to be, while Mulder fights to return his life to normal before it's too late. Out of 10, Andrew, what would you score this episode?
It was, somewhere between 8 and a 9, I should know. This would be slightly less. I'd say, I'd probably say a 7.5 for me. Again, it's good. I enjoy it. I enjoy watching it. Again, that discrepancy between something you watch purely for entertainment, enjoyment of it, versus having a more critical eye toward it. There's more going on. It's the necessary resolution for the plot. It's a lot more convoluted for me. So this is where I feel like, part 1, you really get to play with and have more explicit comedy for the most part than part 2 does. So it's almost inevitable that it's going to be, like with most things, the sequel is not usually the standard of the original. So yeah, slight dip for me, but again, just because of the resolution that it had to force, and it does feel a bit rushed in parts.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I think I'm gonna give mine the same, like a high 8, maybe a 9. Which is what IMDb gave it, merely because it has, when I originally did the 5 questions of X, my favorite scene was in this episode.
Oh.
So that's what I said was my favorite moment, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So IMDb says 9.0 out of, at the time of this recording, 2,989 votes, which I think is interesting because Dreamland 1 got a 9.1, but it had almost 1,000 more votes. Not almost 1,000. 300, 200.
Okay.
I can't math.
It's okay.
Okay, so let's dig into the episode then and talk about it. This is an interesting recap, I think, of the show. Like, they're going back over. And I wonder if partly they're doing this because of maybe any possible new viewers they might have picked up from the movie, because the movie came out before the season started. If they were just kind of like trying to regroup and reestablish who Mulder is as a character and kind of give a little bit of interesting background there, because we've got Morris Fletcher going back over Mulder's life, and he says, this guy's just one step away from pushing a baby carriage full of tin cans down the street. And I wrote down, I was like, is that what he would be without Scully? Is that what Mulder would be without Scully? Would he just be pushing tin cans down the street if Scully wasn't his partner?
Yeah, I was trying to think what I thought about this teaser. Because I don't objectively dislike it, really, but I want to refer real quick to one of our fans in the X-Files basement, the XCast podcast fan group. Real quick, just want to pull out a quote because I feel like exactly what he said. This is from Chandru. So credit to you. Thank you. The teaser narrated by Morris Fletcher bothers me, he says. It's overplayed and hammy, but also gives off this almost epic vibe, like Morris is here for the long haul. Obviously, anyone watching the episode knows this is not true, but again, it feels manipulative because the dramatic stakes are not inherently there. I agree with that. It does kind of, it's meant to be, I think, comedic, obviously, and Michael McKean is very comedic, and it's a very comedic character, but yeah, it's like it's trying to blend this sort of epic, the epic nature of the show's usual voiceovers, right, that Chris Carter usually writes or whatever, and so this just, I don't know, it didn't quite come off for me, and what Chandru expressed, I kind of feel the same way.
In the end, Mulder's got to get back to his body somehow. You don't necessarily know how,
right?
So yeah, it does have that kind of like, oh, what? This isn't going to be the X-Files forever, but yeah.
Right.
So I do think it's interesting that he's like super cool with just taking over Mulder's life. And, he's just like, so this accidentally happened, but hey, I'm going to make the most of it. Like, this is going to be the life I never got to have.
Exactly.
Like, that's just super evil. Like, that's just...
Well, he's a pretty slimy character, and this isn't the last we see of him, really. And it kind of sets it up, and I mean, not that we didn't get that in part 1, but he is. I mean, it's kind of how he is.
I like the feeling where he's like, all right, well, this is this loser guy who has been living this life in this body, like, until now, but not anymore. Ha 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 ha.
Right.
It's like, it's just short of that evil laugh.
Exactly. One thing I do, and we kind of referred to this in the last episode, but one thing that I like that they did, because I feel like they did it in just the perfect way. They didn't overdo it. It's more of a delicate touch, but this guy is seemingly some sort of PR officer for Area 51, right? His job is to throw these conspiracies out there and do the media spin and try to control the narrative. And, we get into this more deeply with the lone gunman. But when he just has some great reaction shots here. What he really thinks of Mulder, and the guy is a real nut job is what he thinks. And so I like how they kind of, again, they don't overdo it. It's kind of more deftly done, but they really do kind of get his opinion thrown in there, And then when you meet the lone gunman with him, he, just lets loose on him. But it really, I like how they do that, I think there was one part in the first episode when Scully and the real Mulder are talking on the phone, and Scully tells Morris as Mulder to answer the phone, and Mulder's like, this line is tapped, and Fletcher just makes his face like, this guy's a nut job.
Yes.
I like how they do that.
He's so good with the eye rolling.
He really is.
Yeah,
I like how they do that. Yeah.
He's just like, oh, and especially like we're getting a little ahead, but in the lone gunman scene where he's just like, you guys are such idiots. I can't believe you believe this stuff. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's really good. He plays it really well.
He does. He really does.
And so in the first scene, this picks up right where we left off in last week. So they're in the gas station and Mulder's being hauled away. Gillian Anderson is great in this because I love throughout the whole episode, like after she knows Mulder's Mulder, she treats him so differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When she's interacting with Mulder back in Dreamland 1, she's like, why are you acting like this? Like, it's just, like, really baffling to her. And she knows something's off. She just can't figure out what. But then, like, once she knows, like, she talks to Morris Mulder as, like, the real Mulder. And it's, like, everything about her completely changes.
Right.
Seeing what a great actress Gillian Anderson is and how she, like, adjusts for that is really fun. Because she's technically acting with David Duchovny, but he's supposed to be looking like somebody else. That had to be, like, really weird to try to wrap your brain around that, like, as an actor. She did a great job.
Oh, she did. And so, there are some people who've criticized the role that Scully gets in these 2 episodes. And they've said, I think it was actually the book I was talking about earlier, The Critical Companion, the old AV Club reviews, they're saying, like, there's really not much for her to do aside from giving some really good reaction shots. And I'm not trying to downplay it because, I mean, it's not as meaty a role for her, I guess, as it would be, Duchovny, but she does them so well that it really just becomes this, I mean, it's vital to the plot and the comedy and the pacing of everything. So, don't want to downplay it. It's a fair criticism, but again, she does it so well and it works really well. And as you said, you can kind of tell when the switch in her happens and she realizes, I don't understand this, but I understand this is not my Mulder.
Yes,
this is not the reality as it should be. And again, it's you have to judge that as a viewer off of how she reacts. So it's subtle, but it's very well done.
Well, that's why I love this episode so much, because it's so meaty. Like, because if you stop and think about it, you've got Scully, and everybody talks about so much and so often, like, the X-Files are Mulder's life's work. They're his crusade. Like, even Scully said it in the last episode. She's like, this is your crusade. Like, this is your life's work. But it's her life's work, too. Like, she chose to stick with Mulder and to fight this fight with him. And so, and as soon as her sister was killed, that's when it became her crusade, too. And here she is, with this weirdo who's like in Mulder's body, and he's completely like screwing over everything that she has spent so much time. You know, she's been abducted, her sister was killed, all of these things have happened to her because of sticking with Mulder. And you know, she chose that. She could have left at any time and given up and done something else with her life, but she wanted to stick with him. Even in the movie, she reaffirmed, she's like, I don't want to do this without you, Mulder. And so that's where we are. And here she is being faced with the fact that she's going to have to do this without Mulder. And she clearly does not want to do it. You know, like, she's not in this. If Mulder is in Mulder's body and he's, you know, taking over this life, like, you know, she's faced with the fact that she's kicked out of the bureau. And she seems like she's not going to try to fight that, you know? That's just really intense, I think. And I feel like a lot of people don't tend to acknowledge that very often. She's like spent her whole life, or not her whole life, her whole FBI career trying to fight this fight with Mulder, and now here she is faced with the fact that she's gonna have to give it up because this jerk face came in and like took over Mulder's body, and like what she's faced with having to give up.
Yeah,
which is really sad and very angsty.
There's a lot to unpack in the episode, and I think sometimes I completely agree with you. I very much enjoy these episodes, and I think that sometimes they get a little unfairly dismissed as just a, you know, comedic kind of exercise. You know, the fact that it's kind of a, I don't know what the term would be, like a one and done. You know, the episodes happen almost out of time. They don't affect anything else that comes before. You know, it's a time warp, basically. But it's also a good character piece for Mulder and Scully, you know, and you have Morris Fletcher, who is a very good character and Michael McKean is a great actor. So yeah, I definitely agree that I think sometimes this episode gets unfairly dismissed as, oh, you know, season 6, you know, humor, just, you know, they're experimenting, which, yeah, it's true. But again, there is a lot that you can go back to and find and enjoy.
Yes, definitely. And we get Julia Vera back as Lana Chi, who's just phenomenal. And I looked up photos of her, you know, and she does not look any. They did some great special effects and makeup on her for this episode. Like, you would not recognize her if you didn't know. And I have seen her in lots of things, and I never would have guessed that was her. So she's a very prolific actor, like character actor. She's been in lots and lots of shows, and she even does a voice for Elena of Avalor, which my daughter loves. And I was like sitting here watching this show with her and didn't even know it was Julia Vera. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, she's great. She was in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in that movie, which is like, that's a huge movie. I love when how she calls Mulder Pencil Neck and Desk Monkey, and like she's got all these names.
Yeah.
This is the best part.
Oh yeah.
It's so
yeah,
funny.
she's definitely an underappreciated part of what makes these episodes so good, I think. And she has the best opportunity to kind of show that off here in part 2.
Mulder's been arrested, or not arrested, but just disappeared, she says. She's like, we've been disappeared. So yeah, she's great. And then we've got Morris playing computer golf. I love how his answer to making Mulder the golden boy of the FBI is to sit there and play desk computer golf. That's how he's going to make Mulder a golden boy, is to play computer golf and kiss Kirsch's ass.
He's pretty much going to make Mulder into a real desk monkey, right? You know, just you know, sit at your desk until you're called to do whatever it is you're called to do, you know? And again, that's Morris Fletcher for you. That's the government bureaucrat, you know, kind of role, I think, that we're led to believe that the life he leads.
So Scully knows at this point. She's got it figured out. He invites her over for dinner and says he's going to cook. And, like, if she didn't already know that wasn't Mulder, like, that would have to be like the nail in the coffin, because there's no way Mulder is ever going to cook anything for her ever. And even if he did, she wouldn't want to eat it, because let's be real. I just always imagine Mulder just having like moldy old Chinese food in his refrigerator and like, oh.
Yeah, and you have the scene here right before she shows up. You know, she's gotten her 2-week suspension without pay. Mm-hmm. She's kind of, you know, down, whatever about that. He invites her over to his place to cook her dinner that night, and you have all this prep work that he's in Mulder's apartment. He's looking around. He's like, oh my god, this place is, you know, whatever. And so he goes out and redecorates it and buys the, of course, the classic waterbed.
Yeah, that's a lot of work for one afternoon.
Oh yeah, you know, and he makes it like this Playboy weird kind of haven, right? He puts a mirror on the ceiling above the bed and things that Mulder would never do, you know. And so yeah, I like how they kind of, I mean, it's hammed up. It's a bit cartoonish how he is, you know, doing this, but you know, it definitely gives credence to the idea that Scully definitely by this point knows what's going on.
Right. And the one thing that struck me is he goes grocery shopping. He decorates the entire apartment, and it looks nice. And it makes me feel really bad for his wife, because he's doing all this work to get with Scully, when if he would just do all that work to, like, stick with his wife, they could have a great marriage. If he just went grocery shopping for her and just got the damn milk, like, I know it was Mulder not getting the milk, but, like, she had to scream at him, like, don't forget the milk,
right.
You know? Like, if he would just get the fucking milk for her,
right.
Like, that would help them so much.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And, you know, I don't know how interesting this is to other people besides you and me, maybe, but I've always had an issue with how they write the marriage in this story, because, you know, well, we can talk about it more at the end, but, you know, it kind of facilitates between these, you know, he's obviously this absent-minded, you know, absent husband and father, you know, kind of just shows up late. You know, some of that's due to the nature of his work, but most of that's just him being who he is. And then you're right. I mean, he goes to all this effort, and he's in this other guy's body and inhabiting this new life, and clearly has no moral qualm about the idea that he's going to screw around, you know, and you know, it's, and then when he does apologize and they have some sort of, you know, the reunion that happens at the end of this episode, and it is very sweet and very, very well done, but it just seems so jarring to go from this to that, you know, so quickly. So yeah, I have a little problem with how they chose to portray that, but anyway, we can talk about that later.
Yeah. Yeah, it also makes me wonder, like, I guess when they had the executive assistant in the apartment in the last episode, did they just do it, like, on the couch? Probably. Like, it's funny because he opens the door and he's just like, I don't even know where, there's, like, no bedroom. Like, he's surprised. Like, wouldn't he have looked for that in the last episode?
Yeah, he's never been in that apartment before. And I'm like, well, no, we have, you and other people. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's kind of a discrepancy there.
Oh, and when we get to it, I have some things to say about the bathroom situation, but not quite there yet. We're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit, but that's okay. That's the point. This is fun to talk about. So we get Mulder calling Mrs. Chi Grandma Top Gun, which I love. We can't skip over that.
That was good.
And then we've got the Wegman meeting. I love how they write everyone else's perspective. So they're like, you're a genius. You are just so smart. Like, you're trying to trick him. Way to go. And he's, like, got no clue what's happening at all. Right. But he's just going to go with it. And he's like, okay. And he's like, well, that's because I can't trust you. And they're like, oh, you're just, you know. Yeah. Wegman knows he himself is the mole this whole time. And he's playing it like he thinks Maury is the mole, which is really crafty. He knows what he's doing. He knows he's covering his butt. Yeah. Or does he have it figured out at this point? No, he doesn't.
I don't think so. I know, as if you're a first-time viewer, you probably won't have it figured out at this point. It's so convoluted. It really is. I mean, it's, you know, I like it, but obviously, you know, the plotting of how this whole, you know, mole and everything works is secondary to the comedy, to the gags in this episode.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, for sure. Now, this is when he comes home with the groceries, all of that. Morris comes home to Mulder's apartment, and This summer, I had an existential meltdown. And I spent all day long with the X-Cast crew sending polos and trying to figure out where the hell Mulder's bathroom is in his apartment. I drew diagrams. I watched episodes, paused episodes. I got screenshots. I did some full-on deep investigating into this. Mm-hmm. And the only answer that was satisfactory to me that I could grab a hold of came from Frank Spotnitz, because I even tweeted to him about it. I was like, Frank Spotnitz, please tell me where's Mulder's bathroom, because this is ruining my life. I lost an entire day to this, Andy. I'm not
this
joking.
This is great.
And his response, he came back, he goes, I always thought that Mulder's bathroom was at Scully's house. And I was like, okay, I can get on board with that shipperiness.
Yeah.
So clearly Frank Spotnitz is a secret shipper, or maybe not so secret, but I was like, where is it? He's like, it's at Scully's house. It's like, okay, I'm good with that. We can a good point. Settle on that.
That's a good point.
Anyway,
makes you appreciate the nuances and the little things of like set design, right?
This episode is just full of,
Yeah.
But so we've got Mulder back at Morris's house. The kids are just awful, and Terry goes, "Mom's taking out a restraining order on you." And she says, "You mean special tramp, Dana Scully?" Poor Joanne. I feel bad for her. This has got to be a tough life. She's dealing with this jackass for a husband, and her kids are grouchy all the time because their parents are probably fighting all the time, and just, she's really the one with the short end of the stick in this episode, I think.
Yeah.
Throughout these next few sequences, we kind of go through Morris and Scully. Scully finally comes back, and she's playing it straight. This time she knows, which I think is interesting, because why is it that whenever any guy gets Mulder's body for himself, they want to immediately get it on with Scully? Like, that's the first thought any guy thinks of. Like, when they're in Mulder's body, like, because we've got Small Potatoes, Eddie Van Blunt is impersonating Mulder. He doesn't technically have Mulder's body, but he looks like Mulder enough to be convincing. So I think that counts as taking over his body.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You're right. And I feel like some of that's probably the writers doing fan service. The little bit of glee that they probably have in the writer's room thinking, we're going to Mulder with Scully, but it's not really real. Just kind of screwing with you. But yeah, so I mean, you're right. Yeah. You have in both episodes, you have the idea of someone who's not happy with their life in one way or another stepping in and finding, hey, I can seemingly do anything I want with no consequences. This is my new life. And yeah, I think it's probably fan service that makes it, Scully's the immediate target for them.
But also, I think it is interesting that Eddie Van Blunt was a more convincing Mulder than, because she immediately, like, even though she didn't know about Morris, like, she knew something was off, and she recognized it enough to be like, "This, you are not yourself. This is not you," to Mulder. But with Eddie Van Blunt, I mean, he was suave. He was debonair. Like, he got in there. He got really close, right. And she did not seem to know until she was, like, ready. So I don't know if that was part of just Eddie Van Blunt's charisma, because it wouldn't be the first time he had pretended well enough to be somebody's significant other. So yeah, I wonder, being more of a loser, like Mulder is technically a loser, gave him more of a leg up on that. I don't know. So Scully has the handcuffs ready. She knows she knows what's up, and she knows this guy. She doesn't know who he is, but she knows him well enough by now to understand what he's here for. And she very suavely says, like, "Let's try the handcuffs." Yeah. And he totally goes for it.
Yeah.
Hook, line, and sinker. Yep. Yeah. I do like the symbolism when he has the champagne and he goes into the kitchen, and he, like, grabs the champagne and, like, shoves it down in the bucket. I'm like, yeah, that's some innuendo there. So there's some fun moments in this scene here. I did notice, I don't know if you thought about this, but when they're sitting on the bed, we're kind of skipping around just a little bit here, but when they sit on the bed, and he's like, do you hate it? And she's like, she kind of has, like, that note of melancholy in her voice, and she's sort of, like, looking around. She's like, no, I don't hate it. Like, it makes me wonder if, like, she wishes it really was Mulder right then.
Yeah.
She's just, like, maybe she's thinking about it. She's like, no, I don't hate it. Like, this would be fun with actual Mulder, but
right.
Why can't
There's
it just
a part of her that wishes this were the situation with the actual Mulder, maybe?
Yeah.
I know we're just shipping it all up in here, but, you know.
We are, yeah.
Just food for thought.
Yeah, I like how she played that, anyway. My favorite line, baby me and you'll be peeing through a catheter. It's one of the best lines of the whole series.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic line.
It's awesome. Clearly, he's miserable. And he's using this opportunity to, like, start fresh. I love that he's like, I've got kids that would kill me in my sleep for the insurance money. And he's blaming everyone but himself, obviously, because it's everyone else's fault.
It does shed light, though, on why, as if you didn't already know. I mean, context clues, but he, you know, it's a more explicit, you know, like what, you know, the house is underwater or whatever, double mortgage, you know, unhappy kids, it's unhappy wife. It's just that, you know, complete dissatisfaction with his life that's thrust him into just like having at it with Mulder's life and everything. So again, we know that by this point, but in case there was any doubt, we're going to make it explicit now.
We've got the motivation here. This is the motivation scene. Yeah. And so, of course, you know, right on cue, the informant calls when he is insisting that he doesn't know how to get in touch with the informant. Conveniently, the informant calls. So they're back in Nevada, and they're at the little alien.
This looks like a fun little place. You know, I think this would be a fun place to go.
It's the hopping place in town.
Yeah.
In Rachel, Nevada, where all the people are in town. Everyone in town is at the little alien. So it turns out, we find out that the informant is Wegman himself, and he did not want to actually crash the ship. He wanted to disable the stealth module so Mulder could see it. So that was his motivation there. And that's how all of this began. And then we've got the real Mulder comes to Scully, and this is the first time she actually, like, sees Mulder as, like, when she knows. And that's kind of, she's like, is it really you in there? You know, it's kind of sad, because I know she misses him. They're best friends, you know, they're partners.
I like how that she delivers that line. It's like this mix of because it's not meant to be a funny line. I don't think it's a genuine, like, distrusting but hopeful. You know, her voice is kind of small. Like, is it really you? I like how they it's those reactions that she gets to do in the episode. It's the subtle stuff that you really can pick up on and go for.
Then Joanne sees them in the car together, and she goes in to cry, and Morris, the real Morris in Mulder's body, sees her crying and kind of starts to look like maybe he sort of kind of feels a little bit bad. But then Mulder comes back in his body, and she throws a drink on him, and somehow they both end up in the bathroom, and Mulder sees himself in the mirror behind him, which is super weird. Like, I can't even imagine.
No. It's the whole, all the scenes, because, I mean, this is the part when I think of how convoluted, it's the little alien scenes and everything, because this is where I really have to keep reminding myself of who is who, and what we're seeing is not what is actually, this is where, for me, it gets extremely difficult to keep tracking. You know, well done and everything, but I doubt I'm alone in that. You know, you have to constantly remind yourself who is who, and it makes it harder, at least it makes it harder for me to follow the story when I'm distracted by that and trying to figure out all that.
Right. And I'm wondering how they made the choice to play it this way and to film them as themselves, because they could have swapped it. They could have had David Duchovny playing Michael McKean and swapped it around that way.
Right.
Which would have been an interesting way to go, but I wonder how that would have changed the dynamic.
Yeah. It would have been very different, I think.
I think it was a good choice, even though it is slightly confusing for the viewer, but I think that everyone reacts enough that you can figure it out eventually, or at least, it's clear enough.
Right.
I haven't read the scripts, but I'm interested to see how the scripts read like that, because that had to be, I wonder if that was a writing choice or a directing choice or what. Then they've got, I really love when Wegman comes into the bathroom and they just both peek up over the top.
Yeah.
Like, are they both standing on the toilet? Like, how does that work? I don't know how they're both up there like that, but it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So they do a foil. They've got Wegman distracting the men in black. He's like, let's go, man. And they never suspect him in anything. Mm-hmm. He's just like, let's go.
Right.
And then he gets out scot-free. And then they do a little switcheroony. So Scully ends up with the data recorder and Morris in Mulder's body.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mulder is in Morris's body, and he's got not the flight recorder. Is it beer? I can't remember.
Yeah, he carried out some beer, yeah.
So then we've got the lone gunman. This is probably one of the best scenes. This is probably my second favorite scene in the whole episode.
There's some great stuff in here.
I just love how you get like those few seconds of them being themselves and like with nobody else around, and you're just like, I love those little tiny moments that they give us with the lone gunman, and just like, this is how they live. So clearly they're learning Spanish together and they're practicing their Spanish, and each one is very clearly established as like their role, because you've got Langley, who only like gives half a shit about what they're doing, so he's like trying but not really. So he's like, more huevos rancheros. And then Frohickey has to be the one who's always right. So he's like, mas huevos rancheros. And then, Byers, he's the polite one. So he has to add the please, por favor. And then you get it's just like that whole, it's only a few seconds, but it's just genius.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
And it's like the idea that this is like late at night, right? I mean, I think we're led to believe this is late at night, and we're just serving up some eggs and,
practicing Spanish.
Doing what we're doing. This is just the evening here, I guess. And
this is how these men... No wonder, like, Byers wanted Suzanne Modesky. He thought about what it would be like with her.
He just wanted out. He wanted a normal life with a normal people.
Bless him. Oh, poor Byers. Yeah. So, then Scully comes in, and I love how hard it is for her to say out loud, like, what's going on. She's just like, I just can't even with this.
Yeah.
She just had it. Poor Scully. And all of the stuff where Morris is like just making fun of them and stuff, and he's like such a jerk about it, but it's also kind of interesting to think about, like you said earlier.
Yeah, he just comes in here. He just comes in and he's just nimbing around their place, right? Picking up stuff and laughing and just, I like how that he just goes in uninvited and he just starts looking in and rifling through their stuff and thinking, God, these guys,
But they're seeing Mulder and they're like, what's with him?
Right, right, exactly.
And he's like, there is no Saddam Hussein. I made him up. He's doing dinner theater in Tulsa. And I think it's kind of a fun version of the Men in Black, because like in Jose Chung's, you've got like the real Men in Black where they're like trying to take over the life and like change your memories, and you didn't see a UFO, you saw Venus. They're a little bit more intimidating, but here in this episode, the Men in Black are presented as like these guys who just make shit up all day. And
I really like how they, again, as I said earlier, he's kind of the PR spin guy, right? So he has a great line in here after he talks about Saddam Hussein. He's like, I come up, these ideas that you guys obsess about and write about, I come up with these on the toilet, It's just this whole, he's just so dismissive of them, people who are, more, conspiracy minded or whatever. This is his job. He's the public misinformation officer. He's, spreading around this propaganda or whatever. And he pities people like Mulder, like the lone gunman, who just play into that. And, But yeah, he's very condescending toward them here, and yet it's also very funny. And I just like how they played this whole thing off.
Absolutely. And as a writer myself, I kind of really appreciate this aspect of Maury. Like, the one thing I don't mind about him is, like, how fun would that be to, like, be part of a secret Men in Black organization and just make stuff up all day. Like, this is the narrative. Okay. And it's like you get in the Men in Black writer's room and you're like, all right, we need a distraction for this. How are we going to do it? What are we going to make up? Who are we going to, like, you know, fake kill out? Like, you know, they, like, hid Elvis or whatever. Like, he's not really dead probably. And they, like, had to make up a narrative for that, you know, and he's Jesse. Like, he's been doing this since the 70s. Yeah. So... Exactly. Which kind of makes me wonder, like, how old is he actually? Like, but this is the 90s, so 20 years, probably not that long. Like, I wouldn't mind having that job as a secret Men in Black, like, coming up with all these plot lines.
Great opportunities for creativity and...
Mm-hmm. Good times. So, we've got Wegman and Mulder, and he finally knows, like, Mulder's not Mulder, so they get to talk about it now. And this is a very fascinating scene to me because Mulder was out there chasing UFOs and Wegman is basically in the same situation as Mulder is. Like, he was trying to get information from Mulder. Mulder's trying to get information from him, and neither one of them know anything.
He has a great line in here, Wegman does. Says, you know, everything that they're making, these, you know, top secret flights, whatever. He says it's engineered in Utah, you know, and it's like he has this almost childlike wonder about, I want to know if aliens really exist. Like this whole, you know, he talks about the sum of his life and hiding things and all this misinformation and all this. And yet at the root of it, what, you know, the average Joe would wonder, you know, is all this done to hide the existence of aliens? Well, he don't even know, you know, and I like how it's very subversive, the humor and how they do that here. So I appreciate that.
And it just goes to it just like establishes how futile this whole thing is, because it's like they're both chasing the truth and they both think that they found it. Right. And then they both realize, no, they're still hiding stuff from us. Mm-hmm. And it's like just layers upon layers of misinformation. And, you know, it's actually like, as much as we like to tease about how the consortium and the syndicate are just like very incompetent most of the time and they like don't totally know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like here on this level, it's like actually seems like whoever's in charge, I'm guessing it's probably not the syndicate. I don't think it's a cigarette smoking man. But whoever is in charge on this level seems to know what they're doing and how to like separate the operations so that nobody actually knows what's going on. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit more you know, competent there. Yeah. It's more of a plan, which I appreciate. You don't get much of a plan when it comes to the X-Files.
No, you don't. So you got to grab it where you can.
Exactly. So they go back to, you know, the lone gunman for a minute, and they kind of, you know, just establish again, like, he's just being a dick. And he calls Frohickey sneezy. Oh my God. It's too much. Yeah. And then we've got these people completely new characters, random people coming up, and he's like, this is the black mailbox. This is it. Mm-hmm. Just over the top a little bit. Yeah. And then we see the time warp thing come through, and then they were kissing, and now they're like melded together. Mm-hmm. So we're like, uh-oh, something's happening. Now this is my favorite scene. Like, I just love everything about this scene because essentially they had to play it like they're not going to see each other again. Like, this is it. They don't have the answer. They don't have a way to fix this that they know about yet. So right now, they're going to have to go their respective ways. Scully's out of a job. She's out of the bureau. Mulder's going to be stuck with these jackass Men in Black guys. Like, they just have to walk away from each other for now. And it's just, like, completely devastating and so angsty.
you're right, how they had to play it. I always have this game in my mind of, and I'm sure other listeners do too, but the idea of, when should the show have ended? Like, what would be the complete moment where you never have to say the show jumped the shark or did something you didn't want or whatever, and not at all seriously proposing this was it. But if this were the last episode, if this were how it ended, and kind of playing that game in your mind. But, yeah, I like it because, like you said, Scully's out of a job. She's potentially, leaving the bureau. Mulder is now going to be a family man with a wife and 2 teenage kids, and, this is it.
Everything he didn't want.
Exactly. And so they've kind of been permanently estranged from one another now, at least in this scene. And it seems like there really is no hope. He talks about how, or maybe it's Scully, that, random variables have to line up perfectly. This is like it's not going to happen, essentially. There's very little hope that anything could actually happen. So it's like they're kind of resigning themselves to that fate. So yeah, it's sad, but I like how they handled it. It's a very well written and a very sweet, moment.
Sometimes I like to imagine, like, what would happen if they didn't get their body switched back. Like, Scully needs a job. What if Mulcher just divorced Joanne and he could be a free man, and then he could hire Scully to the Men in Black and she could come be his partner again, and they could at least be friends, because she definitely can't kiss him. He's too damn ugly.
I was just saying that if she can resign herself to Morris Fletcher's face, we'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's Mulder's personality. Like, they're friends. It's Mulder in there, and she knows it. And she's been friends with Mulder, and she can be friends with Mulder, but I don't think they could ever, like, be together. But at least it would be something. Like, at least she could still have her best friend, At least they could still... And then Mulder and Scully would be the ones creating these narratives. And life would be fine. Like, they could just feed information to the lone gunman. And it wouldn't be the best, but they could at least, do their own investigation and be subversive from inside the Men in Black. Like, it wouldn't be terrible, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It would have certainly would have taken the show in a different direction, right?
Exactly. So, yeah. And then, so my favorite moment is when he puts those sunflower seeds in her hand. Mm-hmm. And she just looks at him, and then he takes one back, and it's just like, oh my God. It's too much. Just devastating. Mm-hmm. Oh, and that look on her face, and she's just like, so this is it. This is how it ends.
Yeah.
Just, okay. Yeah. So
it's a good scene. I mean, yeah, there's a lot to get from it. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then this is where we have our shift. The kids, we realize, are actually back to normal, and the Man in Black. Sorry, his name escapes me. His character's name in the. I can't remember.
Oh, Grodin.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy who actually does kind of look like a pencil neck.
Yes. We'll just call him Pencil Neck.
He's very scrawny.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So he knows, like, I think this is a very clever way to show the audience how this is going to work. Like, visually. Because, you've got he's got it figured out now. Like, he knows how to fix it. And he actually wants to fix it, unlike Morris and pretty much everybody else. Nobody else actually cares that this is a thing. And I like the excuse that they gave him because, he's like, I've had a spotless record and I want to keep that. Like, that's a very valid and reasonable thing to say, which I really appreciated a lot, that they made that a thing. Because up until now, you just kind of are like, well, he's just this Man in Black and he doesn't really care about what happens to the general population or whatever. Like, he's just here, to inveigle and obfuscate. But yeah, so they're starting to figure everything out. The Men in Black come and they get the pilot and Mrs. Cheese switched back. It's working. They know this is going to work. So then Scully still doesn't know, and Maury still don't know, and she goes to try to, or no, she does know because they were she figured out from the gas station. That's when Scully figures it out.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. One thing, this is random here, but the timeline of when it's daytime and nighttime is all over the place here. You notice that? Because, it's almost like, at least I thought at first, after her and Mulder have, the scene there, oh, that's it, they're done, they're going to go back to DC. Well, clearly it's the next morning, right? Because it's daytime. It seems like it's morning. They drive past the gas station. That's when Scully realizes, wait, this place was burned down. Nobody was here, and she's kind of gaining awareness of it. But then that, I took it to mean that's kind of supposed to happen at the same time as when the kids, are no longer fused together, but that's nighttime. So it kind of jumps back and forth a little bit. I don't know how deliberate that is, or if that's just the way it was shot, but the timeline gets a little fuzzy here.
I kind of reconciled it in my mind by thinking that meeting and the kids happened at pre-dawn, where it was close enough to daylight, where if they were driving for an hour, maybe the gas station is an hour out of town or something.
And I mean, this is certainly not the first time where we've had a little bit of discrepancy between daytime, nighttime with plot.
Exactly.
So it doesn't bother me. It's more just wrapping your head around, okay, this happened, and
yeah. You don't have enough to wrap your head around this episode already. We've got to figure out the timeline too. Yeah, I get it.
Yep.
This is where we get that scene with Morris and Joanne.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it gets me a little bit teary-eyed a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good scene. I mean, it's played really well, and I mean, this is where, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can have the right words for it, but he's kind of telling her all the details about their first apartment and events of their wedding day and when their their daughter was born. All these kind of like Mulder tried to do last episode with Scully, sharing, I know these very private things. How else would anybody know this? And same with what he's doing with her, and how they play it off. She looks back and she's just crying and has all this kind of, trying to wrap her head around what's happening, and newfound hope and everything. And he seems so, sincere. Like he just, kind of stumbled and he's kind of seen, okay, here's what's going on. It's just that it goes from what we saw in in the first part, and then with him, with other women and trying to seduce Scully, and all of a sudden we're here, and again, we're not going to remember what happened. What we did is going to have no consequences in real life. It really didn't happen. Time folding back on itself or whatever. So, I try not to take it too literally or whatever. But it's just, I don't know. It's kind of that it's a little jarring for me.
Yeah, and I wonder if he had the opportunity in the bar when he saw her crying, how that would have played out. There was that shot where, he saw her crying and it looked like it really affected him, and that he actually was starting to kind of feel bad that she was upset, and you could see that he sort of cared about her, but then he got interrupted with everything else and all the other things happened, and the moment's gone. So I felt like that at least was valuable, in that even if it was only just a few seconds, it sort of kind of established that he's almost there, and that he does have some feelings towards his wife. He's not I mean, he's a total dick, but at the same time, he does have some sympathy and empathy when he sees his wife crying. At least that affects him,
Right.
And so I feel like that helped a little bit, it helped me get there. It wasn't such a huge leap.
It's a good scene. I mean, it is a good scene. Just take it on its face, it's a good scene, and it seems like, it gives you hope for the future, right?
Yeah. Except, the fact that they don't remember it, and then they just go back to hating each other.
Well, that's true, right?
Being mad,
so
and married.
It's almost like we could do with a little scene at the very end of the episode. We have Mulder and Scully. We see them back to normal with no memory, but it'd be interesting to see what's going on in the Fletcher household,
Yeah. But clearly, later he appears, and we know he hasn't changed his ways. his philandering, finagling ways.
Yeah, I guess it's that knowledge
Joanne.
too. It's that knowledge in my head that kind of makes me think, oh, well, this is not really gonna whatever.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Poor I would like to think that maybe she does eventually divorce him and she gets to live a happy life, but I don't know. Okay, so the time warp is snapping back like a rubber band. I like that line because it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it helps you visualize how this is going to work.
And they're there's this desperation about it. Like, we have to hurry, you know, we have to go. You have to be standing in the right spot at the right time. Like Mulder was saying before, it's all these little variables have to perfectly line up the event horizon, you know, it's like a moment in time. And so, yeah, I like how it's kind of this desperation to get to it.
And they do get back to that spot and it works, but not before Morris smacks Scully's ass one more time. I love that look from Mulder. Like, he just has that look on his face. He's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how dare you touch my Scully like that? But it's him. Like, see, it's so crazy because he's watching his own body do that. If you think about it, you're like, oh no, he's watching himself smack Scully's ass, and it just gets to him so bad. He hates it so much, which makes me love Mulder even more. Really. But yeah, he's just the worst. Like, if in case we were starting to have any kind of sympathy for him whatsoever, we are reminded that he is just awful.
Right.
And then the time warp happens and everybody's back. We're all back and it's great. And Mulder is so hot and that's just, I can't. It took me a second. I had to oh, Mulder, he's back. It's amazing.
Do you need
shot,
a moment?
Yeah, I do. Like, it was fantastic. And then we've got them back to their lives.
Yep.
Like, it never even happened. Normally that plot device really irritates me. Like, I can't stand when characters have a dream or get together for the first time in a dream. So, like, I'm glad they never actually, did anything.
A lot of that's, you know, based on circumstances probably outside of control, right? You know, someone leaves a show or not available, whatever the case may be. But when it's not, it feels like lazy writing, you know, like, oh, we're giving it an out. It's fan service or whatever. And it's like, what's the point? It's completely pointless, really.
But this works for me, though. I don't mind it so much.
Well, it's set up, right? I mean, it's an actual concept. It's the whole, you know, we lost time warp, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, like, you kind of know, like, something is up beforehand.
Right.
Like, it's not, like, all of a sudden, oh, it's just a dream. It just, you know, it's not like that. So I think that I can get on board with it a lot better than
Me too.
other times this has happened. Yeah. We get back to, like, regular Mulder, and he's like, thanks for coming out there with me. And you're like, yes, it's definitely Mulder, because he's such a gentleman. And he walks into his apartment, and it's like, a second later, like, walks out and checks the apartment number.
I like
You're
that.
like, oh, wait, what?
Gag. That's funny.
And Scully gets the penny and the dime, the 11 cents melted together.
So let's talk about the waterbed, can we? Just for a minute. You know, everyone knows about the waterbed. Because presumably, we don't see it in this episode. That comes a little bit later this season, the episode Monday. We won't dive into that because we're going to jump ahead.
Yep.
But you saw earlier in this episode that Mulder has a waterbed. He has a mirror above the waterbed. And presumably, you know, even though life is back to normal, his apartment has been, you know, very much redesigned. Not that there was much design in the first place, but it's been designed.
Yes.
So in this episode, you're led to believe, well, something stayed, right? The apartment's been redecorated or anything. I don't know what that's about. I guess it's meant to just kind of say it's a mystery, right? It's one of those mysteries you're never going to get the answer to. Why the bed, other home furnishings presumably stayed, and they didn't. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, are you talking about, like, why he kept things the way they were, or how they got that way?
How they got that way. You know, if you have everything undone, right? So Wegman still has his job, right? I mean, the idea is there's been no repercussions. This was a complete time warp, out of time.
Yeah.
Everything that happened never happened. Nobody remembers anything. No consequences, right?
Right.
Except, you know,
because
his
because it was outside of the time warp.
Right.
Yeah. So the rubber band effect didn't
work
that.
on this particular thing.
Right.
So it's just interesting because ordinarily it would, right? Any actions that were done in the midst of that time warp or whatever we're going to call it are undone, except for presumably whatever changed inside his apartment. And
the penny and the dime.
Right, exactly. So it's, again, I'm not trying to look too much into it. Obviously, it's just one of those tokens that they're going to look at and be like confused about. When did this happen? How did this happen? It's just kind of a fun little gag. I get that.
Well, I do have an answer to that in one of my fanfics I wrote.
Oh, go for it.
Mulder assumes that it's the lone gunman and that they've been bugging him.
Hey, that's completely plausible. I mean, that makes...
So there you go.
That makes perfect
That's how
sense.
Mulder makes... In my head canon... That's how Mulder makes sense of it.
Hey.
So he thinks it's a practical joke by the lone gunman. But yeah, that's the end of it. We have it. We made it. We did it. Side note, before we go to the mailbag, it's 10:13 a.m. Just would like to note that. Eastern time.
This has been such an eerie day. It's 10:13 a.m. Eastern time. We have no definitive answer as to who directed which episodes. Depending on where you watch your X-Files, you may not be getting the entire truth.
Trust no one, Mr. Blaker.
I learn it every day.
All right. Mailbag. Mailbag time. Mailbag. It's mailbag time. Okay. We should make that a jingle. I feel like we need a jingle, a mailbag jingle.
You really do.
Okay, so Karen Hayflower Frost says, love the lone gunman. Heart. We do too.
Absolutely.
Natalie says, I like the concept that being a man in black is actually a horrible job. So he'd rather be Mulder. It shows how, and by he, I think she means Morris. It shows how much potential Mulder's life has to be happy and fulfilling if he chose it to be. Both Fletcher and Van Blunt recognize this and don't understand why Mulder doesn't take full advantage of his good looks, bachelorhood, and potentially, quote, quote fingers, potentially well-respected job. It makes Mulder's isolation and loneliness even sadder when it's pointed out that he doesn't have to be that way. I wonder if he could go back in time to when he joined the Bureau, would he create a different life for himself while ensuring he still ends up with Scully, of course. That's a good point.
It's a very good point.
I wonder if he would do it differently.
Definitely. I mean,
I don't think he would.
Right, but I like that. Again, I think I said this in the last one. It's, you know, you get with Mulder, you get this snapshot into what would be like if he were a domesticated family man. Would it be this unhappy? You know, a wife and two kids. I mean, it's just interesting to see him in that environment, and I think that there's a lot that you can get from that.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting to also think that just because Mulder doesn't have these things that he feels lonely. I don't think he does.
No.
I think he likes his life. I think he's happy with it. Why should he want to change?
Right.
He's got Scully. He's got the lone gunman. You know, he doesn't need anything else. Like he's an introvert.
It calls back.
I get it.
Yeah, it calls back to the very first scene in part one. You know, Scully's like, "Don't you ever want to, you know, stop the car, live something approaching a normal life or whatever?" And he's like, "This is the normal life." And and it kind of almost at the time you feel like, well, that's kind of a feeble answer, but like you just said, by the time you get through to this, it's well, number one, what is normal? What is happy? And he's satisfied with what he's doing. What his calling is, I think. Yeah.
Chandru Ravinadran has some thoughts. We touched on them a little bit earlier. Yes. I'm going to read the whole thing. And he had some good thoughts from the last episode too. We didn't get to, unfortunately, due to time, but we're going to read them now. So, okay. So he says about Dreamland II, similar to Dreamland, a good episode but severely flawed. The humor works and keeps the episode moving along. This, along with part one, are so very watchable. The interplay between Morris and the lone gunman is hilarious, and Gillian gets to make up for Scully being a bit of a dolt in the first part. with some incredible reactions to Michael McKean. But this one struggles more than the first part because the humor isn't as sharp and because of its need to get back to the status quo. I feel like the humor on the Mulder side of the plot was mostly wrung out in part 1 and that there isn't much left to it here other than the hilarious Grandma Top Gun. The conversation between Mulder and Scully as they say goodbye feels emotionally manipulative because it is no amount of great acting can make me overlook that the script basically follows that conversation with, oh, never mind. Okay. Similarly, Similarly, the teaser narrated by Morris Fletcher bothers me. It's overplayed and hammy, but also gives off almost this epic vibe, like Morris is here for the long haul. Obviously, anyone watching the episode knows this is not true, but again, it feels manipulative because the dramatic stakes are not inherently there. By the nature of this show, we all knew Mulder would be back to himself by the end of the episode. Still, despite its flaws, I still enjoy watching the episode because the Dreamland duo are closer to middle of the road than great episodes. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. I don't know if we'll get to it all, but I agree. I don't know that I personally would use the word manipulative to describe the teaser. I don't, but, that's just me.
I mean, I do think what he said about the fact that it gives it this epic feel when it's only for, another 40 minutes, that does, maybe not manipulative, but it is, I think, misleading. It kind of seems like, well,
yeah.
Because again, you have 42 minutes, so you can't, you can't waste much time. So the fact that they did it at all, it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, it's an opportunity to, give more context to how Morris Fletcher feels about Mulder's pathetic little life, right? That's really the whole point of it. So I don't know. It doesn't sit for me.
I can get on board with misleading.
Yeah.
I can get on board with that. And this is why I love the X-Files fandom, because everybody approaches each episode differently. Yeah. And while Chandu might think it's manipulative and all of that, I personally, I kind of enjoy that aspect of it because it lends to the angstiness. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you suspend your disbelief for the episode and you get on board and you're in it and you just forget about everything else but these 2 episodes and you just let it go and you just go along for the ride, that's what makes it great.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to, when you're not thinking about all the other stuff, and you're just like, oh no, Mulder and Scully are not going to be together again. It's fun.
And you're right. That's what's so great about it, because everyone brings their own views and preferences. And like you said, some people watch, everyone watches the show for 100 different reasons. There are the shippers, there's the non-shippers. There's all these different things that people bring to it. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. You do kind of have to suspend disbelief, which, the whole argument in and of itself about, the ability to do that within the show. But, yeah, you bring different things to it. And so if you are able to suspend disbelief and really immerse yourself in the world as it is right there, versus someone else, it may be harder. It can be hard for me to do that with, the Myth Arc episodes especially. But so, yeah, I get it. And that's what's so great about it, because everyone has these different thoughts, and yet we all love the basics, right? And that's what's so important about it.
Exactly. And then we've got our last comment by Andrew Levitt says, as with Dreamland 1, I'm not a fan of this episode because it just is far too focused on family drama instead of the paranormal element, and mostly ignored Mulder being inside Area 51, where he could find lots of secrets he has been searching for over the last 5 years. Of the 2 episodes, Dreamland 2 is the better one because the tone is less goofy and more about bringing this whole charade to an end. What makes it worse is that none of this ever happens by the end because of a convoluted plot device. A disappointing waste of an episode.
Oh, he's not a fan, as he said. So, he was honest. One thing I will say, I agree with him on the, I partly agree with him on the Area 51 thing. We get that establishing shot in part 1 where, you see aircraft taking off, and it's obviously, I doubt it's a full set. It's probably special effects too. It looked like it. But I think this is what the show does. It's very frustrating to a lot of people, and myself included. It's frustrating, and yet I can appreciate it because it's just how subversive at its height this show was. You're right.
Yeah.
Area 51, right? The behemoth of alien activity, the truth, and all that. And he's in there. And the only time he's ever going to be in Area 51, it's a comedy episode and has very little fact to do with the fact that it's Area 51. And that's the show in a nutshell, isn't it? Like, you have your expectations, and it's like, well, screw your expectations. We're going to give you what we're going to give you. It's that continually subverting fan expectations. Now they do that in parts and it works quite well. They do it in other parts and people are unanimously disappointed. So I'm not saying it works for them all the time, but when you consider the early to mid years, you know, right around now when it's at the top of the ratings and general critical acclaim, you know, they know what people want, right? But they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to drop a little clue here and give you a little bit and then pull the rug out from under you. Right. And that's what this is. Yep. That's what they're doing. Of course, he's inside Area 51. So much potential, but this is not myth arc, right? In and of itself. This, we're going to just make it goofy and make it more of a character piece than anything.
Yeah. So it's the classic Mulder's going to see the UFO, but Scully's going to miss it.
Exactly. Yeah. And no one's going to remember what the heck happened these two episodes, right?
Exactly.
It's just that continual, you know, you're never sure where you can stand with the show, which again, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But for me, in this part, it makes sense that they chose to do that.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree. So that does it for this episode of the X-Cast. We did it, Andrew. We made it through 2 parts.
Oh, this was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
It was. Absolutely. So where can we find you online?
Facebook's the best place. Andy Blaker on Facebook. I'm pretty active in the X-Files basement. Check us out there. Great group of people, great fandom group, and we have a lot of fun there.
Absolutely. I am on Twitter, Sarah L. Blair, and I'm on Instagram, author.sarah.blair. And you can always follow us at the X-Cast, the X_cast, and find us in the basement group on Facebook, like Andy said. So, yeah, good times. And we hope that you guys will join us next time. And until next time, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. We are Starfleet.
Honestly, it felt so great to see the Starship Discovery again.
Yeah, out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Right into the fire. So in our previous episode, I had commented on how I felt like all the dramatic tension that the writers built up with Burnham falling kind of felt like, all right. But here, I felt the exact opposite. It just seemed like the right blend of tension and risk and what's at stake.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and I think there's a couple of reasons for this. One, I think
the giddy carousel of pop.
So there's one particular thing where I think Sylvia just nails the Mannix, absolutely nails them, and nails them to this day. And she says, the Mannix mission is a simple one. They want to make music exciting, glamorous, and interesting again. Make people wake up out of the boredom and meaninglessness of 20th century life and jump up and down to some good old rock and roll music and think about things and have a laugh, because at the end of the day, none of us will ever be happy. And I had to have everything about them immediately.
The Movie Palace.
Before we even think about the book, I suppose, were you coming to this as a Marilyn Monroe fan, particularly?
No, not at all. In fact, I'll admit, it's very awful, but I knew almost nothing about Marilyn Monroe. I knew of her. She's a cultural icon.
Yeah.
I would say she's even gone beyond that now, and she's almost a symbol. So I knew of her. I had seen a few movies that she'd been in, although, to be honest, whenever I watched those movies, I wasn't really focusing on her because she was sort of in the background.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.
Hello again, everyone. This is Sarah coming back with some fresh information. I know that you are still wondering who directed Dreamland 2. Well, I have an answer for you. The Xcast crew did some digging, and we discovered that while we may never know the answer of Mulder's bathroom and where it is located, we definitely know for sure that Kim Manners directed Dreamland 2. So that's one question down and many more to come on our journey here at the Xcast. But we appreciate you listening. And until next time, trust no one.